Welcome to Little Notes and Big Questions. I'm Lindsay Schreiber. In this series, we are taking a look at some of society's biggest issues through the lens of God's Word and developing an apologetic, a systematic, rational defense of what we believe. Last week, we talked about the subject of Therians, otherkin, and furries. We talked about people who think that their identity on the inside does not match the body on the outside. That was a special request from the youth in my church because they are making friends with people who have those sort of feelings. And so I presented that knowing it's sort of a fringe topic, but the topic today affects all of us. Whether it has affected you and you've struggled with this sin, or it's affected someone in your family, or it's just a matter of you live in society where it has absolutely changed the world that we live in. The subject of pornography is a good one to use to explain how we apply God's Word to issues today, even if that particular issue is not mentioned by name in the Bible. Obviously, you're not going to find internet pornography in the Bible because that was not a thing at the time. But we can apply the principles that God gave us about things like lust and how we are to honor one another to the subject of pornography. We're going to start off with our biblical stance. Although the word pornography is not in the Bible, the commands regarding lust and sexual sin certainly apply to this sin. Jesus said that mere lust in the heart qualifies as committing adultery in Matthew 5:27-30. Jesus also said the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body is full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Matthew 6:22-23. Pornography is designed to elicit lust in the heart of the viewer through the senses. Christians are to run from sexual immorality, and pornography is certainly included in that term, which is used in 1 Corinthians 6:18. The root of the word pornography comes from the Greek porneia. We discussed that word in lessons previously. Properly, in this context, it means the selling off or surrendering of sexual purity, promiscuity of any and every type. This word is often translated to sexual immorality or fornication in the Bible. Before we move forward into our defense, I want to share a few statistics with you because I want you to go away from this video understanding how pervasive this issue is and how quickly things have changed in this world. In 1972, Playboy reached 25% of all college men. Now notice, that's a very specific demographic of the population that Playboy was trying to reach. You only thought about pornography being sent to young men. That was the demographic they were after. But a 2020 study showed that now an estimated 91.5% of men and 60.2% of women consume pornography. That was published in the Journal of Sex Research. A Covenant Eyes study found this on the subject of the changing of the porn industry. Although only 7% of millennials and 5% of Gen Zers report consuming virtual reality porn, the experts predict it will grow to a $19 billion industry in the next few years. Virtual reality pornography involves the use of a VR set. You may have seen that used like in gaming. Kids will get a VR set, for Christmas, and they play different kinds of games. Well, now they're coming out with pornography that utilizes VR technology. So now you can wear that headset and you can have a point of view of a sex act with a porn star. That's the next thing on the horizon. It's probably going to be the next big thing that's going to take off. Now I want to talk about teens and porn. In 2022, a study found that 15% of respondents said they first saw online pornography at age 10 or younger. The average age reported was 12. Other studies put that average age for exposure as young as 9 years old for boys. According to a nationally representative survey of U.S. teens, 84.4% of 14 to 18-year-old males and 57% of 14 to 18-year-old females have viewed pornography. Now, it would be easy to dismiss these and say, well, yes, it's a fallen, wicked, evil world, and that's how sinners act. And, I'm always the first one to say I'm not shocked when sinners act like sinners, although these are very concerning statistics, regardless of the soul state that's being claimed of any of them. But I want to tell you now about Christian stats. These come from a 2024 Barna study. Barna is a well-known research group that often does their research in issues that pertain to the church and to religion in America. They found that 2 in 3 pastors, 67%, report having struggled with pornography at some point in their lives, with almost 1 in 5, 18% saying it is a current struggle. So for every 5 churches, one of those pastors is currently struggling with a porn addiction. Pastors under the age of 45 are more likely to say they are currently struggling with pornography. The category under the age of 45, it's about 26%, and over 45 is about 16%. So what did you just see happen there? That 1 in 5 number is all pastors together, but when they separate it out and they look just at the younger pastors, which means that will be the age group that is predominantly leading the church very soon, the number went from 1 in 5 pastors to 1 in 4. When directly confronting the prevalence of this problem, only a third of pastors, 33%, assume porn use is a major or significant problem in their congregations. Overall, most U.S. pastors don't see porn use as a problem for their congregants, revealing a profound disconnect between pastoral perception and actual behavior. Contrary to most pastors' assessments of their congregation, 75% of Christian men and 40% of Christian women report porn consumption on some level. Now, I've mentioned this in previous videos, but when you look at statistics that talk about the number of Christians who are doing something, sometimes that can be a little misleading. So for instance, people like to talk about statistics that say the number of Christian men who beat their wives or the number of Christian marriages that end in divorce. Well, a lot of times that word Christian is a self-reported label. It's not people who are faithful or who are practicing or who regularly attend church and follow the tenets of the faith. It's just people who say they're Christian. So maybe their grandma took them to the Baptist church as a kid, so they called themselves a Baptist forever. That's what those numbers were. Those were self-reported Christian numbers. And it would feel better to stop here and say, but most of those aren't practicing. The problem is that Barna also got the numbers on people who are faithful attendees. While practicing faith does correlate with less porn use, we see that over half of practicing Christians, 54%, report viewing pornography, compared to 68% of non-Christians. Now remember, when they polled their pastors, only about a third of them thought this was a problem within the church. And we're finding more than half of the people in the church are struggling with this addiction. I asked my church last night what they thought was the reason for that, and they came to the same conclusion that I did, which is it goes back to that number of pastors who are struggling with this sin. I reminded them, the thing that always comes back to my mind is the story of David and Bathsheba. We know that David brings this woman to the palace. He impregnates her. He has her husband killed to cover it all up. And then, not too long after this in the story, we hear the story of his daughter Tamar, who was raped by her brother. And David won't do anything about it. He won't say anything about it. He won't deal with it. So his son Absalom has to be the one who handles it. And I feel very strongly that part of the reason for that is that David couldn't say anything about that sexual immorality, that horrific act of his son, because he had also taken advantage of a woman. I think it's the same thing with these statistics, that pastors would rather pretend it's not a problem than address it and risk being outed themselves for the very same sin. I hope I've sufficiently shown you this is a serious issue, and it's one that the church has got to get over our uncomfortableness in dealing with it. We've got to get past this place of this is weird to talk about and just address what is in the Bible. If we're saying that the church can't have conversations about sex and sexual attitudes, well, there's a whole lot of the Bible that's going to have to go missing because it is a driving force throughout the Bible. Lust is a major player in so many of the events that are recorded in the Bible. And it's one of the things that the Bible speaks very specifically about. So I think if the Bible's talking about it, then we need to talk about it. We are going to move forward now to our offensive apologetic. I remind you that offensive doesn't mean we're trying to offend people. It's the idea of like we're moving a ball forward, like the offense in a sport. In offensive apologetics, we present the support for our biblical stance. It is a foolish notion that one can fill their eyes, mind, and heart with sexual images and not be harmed. Proverbs 6:27-28 asks the rhetorical question, can a man take fire to his bosom and his clothes not be burned? Can one walk on the hot coals and his feet not be seared? See, lust starts within, and porn only feeds that fire. It is not possible to continually take in these images and not have it affect you and not have it put lust in your heart. It doesn't work that way, and that's what Proverbs was warning us of. And then James 1:14 says, each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and enticed. That word desire, it means a lust for what is forbidden. And the word entice, properly, it means to bait a hook and set a trap with bait. Figuratively, it is to entice a victim into a moral trap, luring them through their own selfish impulses. It's the idea that death can be disguised as something appealing, and your impulse is for that appealing thing, so you don't even notice that there is a hook underneath of that worm waiting to catch you. You're so driven by your flesh and by your lust that you don't recognize the danger which lies ahead. We are ordered by Scripture to put lust to death in Colossians 3:5. And the last thing I would like to say on the subject of our offensive apologetic is that porn also puts its subjects into demeaning situations, and it always objectifies its subjects. This is counter to our mandate to honor one another as being made in the image of God. We'll talk more about that specific point later on. But I want to talk for a few minutes about the brain and how the brain is affected by pornography viewership. Several things happen in the mind of a porn viewer. I want to talk specifically about something called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is just the brain's ability to change. I'm going to read an excerpt for you because I can't put it better than they did from Fight the New Drug. When you learned to ride a bike, your brain didn't just logically process the steps involved in riding a bike. Your brain literally physically changed itself into a brain built for bike riding. Like Play-Doh, it can mold and reshape itself as it responds to outside forces and experiences. When we engage in an activity, particularly a pleasurable activity, particularly if it involves repetition and intense focus, our brains alter themselves to be better and more efficient at doing that activity the next time. Our brains create what are known as neural pathways. The more we engage in an activity, the stronger the pathway associated with the activity becomes. And once formed, those pathways can become remarkably long-lasting and resilient. Pathways neglected or ignored, even for years, are still there, ready to be revitalized. What we call getting better at something is the brain rewiring and getting better at signals being sent between the same neurons. Studies have shown that when there is a pre-programmed biological reaction to a particular stimulus, that stimulus can be overwhelmed and warped by artificial means. We feel hunger when we see food. We feel sympathetic and protective of things that appear helpless and small. If something artificially overwhelms one of those stimuli consistently, our expectations will begin to change. It's not just that our brains prefer supernormal stimulus. They can change themselves to expect it, and the old normal stimulus, known as real life, suddenly seems less attractive by comparison. Your brain is constantly wanting things to be normal. Your brain is looking for balance. And so if you are constantly overwhelmed by stimuli that are hitting your senses, that are saying something that is abnormal actually is normal, your brain essentially gets to this place where it has to tell itself, okay, this is normal now because then we can calm that feeling down. There's a consequence to that later. We don't have to talk about it in this moment, but just understand your brain trying to regulate is going to create some issues that you may not see right in this moment. I want to give you an example of how this happens outside of the pornography realm. Think about movies from 50 years ago, and we thought they were action-packed and they were so exciting and we thought the effects were so great. Well, today they're very boring because now we're used to something else. Think about fashions that we thought were attractive, and now we would never be caught wearing them. Here's the biggest one I can think of, the change in attraction to body shapes. Back in the 90s, we praised the heroin chic look. We saw models who were literally skin and bones, and we were told that that was the goal. And then when I was a young teenager, we started to see women like Jennifer Lopez and Beyonce, and then later the Kardashians, and we were told that those curves were what made you look like a woman, that that was attractive and desirable. Well, for a minute, we went into this body positivity era where you were pretty much told if you weren't attracted to women who would have never previously been seen as a historically attractive woman, then you're the one who is bigoted and hateful and there's a problem with you. But what happened on the other side of that? Those same body positivity women are now out here peddling drugs like Ozempic. And now we're being told, get on Ozempic. And people are taking it who don't need it. We're heading back to that skinny version day. And now you have people that their whole face is now changing because of that medication that they're taking. And it's becoming a more normal look because it's what we're seeing in the media and presented to us all around. Culture does not shift altogether by accident. It happens because we are inundated with shifting standards coming from every angle, and it overwhelms our brains. And that's why these trends can turn into a whole shift of mindset for a culture. We're changing together because you are being inundated with it from all sides, and your brain is saying, make this normal so I can deal with the abnormal that is coming at me. Our expectations, responses, and preferences can adapt to exaggerated stimuli. This leads to decreased interest or boredom with things that once seemed exciting. Do you see now why I just told you all this stuff about the brain? Because that's what happens when people are engaging in pornography viewership. What used to be enough to arouse and to stimulate, it's going to become normal. So what would have been seen as a sexy scene, 30 years ago, well, you can only see that so many times, and your brain is just going to think this is normal, and it gets adjusted to it, and it's going to need more. Much like a drug. If you have ever had to take a medication, oftentimes with a medication, your body becomes so used to that medicine that soon you have to increase the dosage. The same happens with street drugs. We talked about this in our class last night, how there are people who start off on maybe they start on Percocet. They start off on a medication that they've been given, and then they have to escalate to something stronger, and then they can't get it anymore, so they go to the street. And before you know it, somebody who just started off with, knee surgery or some sort of legitimate issue is now on fentanyl because they had to keep increasing the dose to get what they were looking for, and they're never going to find it again. The same thing happens with pornography. And it ends up leading people towards sexual deviancy that they never thought they would find their way to. We're going to talk more about that too in just a few minutes. I want to move on to the defensive apologetic. So if offensive is presenting our beliefs that help us to move this idea forward, now we get to defensive, which is how do we answer the hard questions? This is where the little notes on the big questions comes in. So I want to share with you some of the biggest arguments that I hear. This is different from the other topics in Little Notes and Big Questions. If you've been watching the series, what you've noticed is that I've been presenting a lot of ways that people may even use scripture to back up their beliefs that are not biblical at all, but they're trying to twist the scripture to make it fit. Pornography is not going to be that way, but what we do find is a lot of excuses made, whether those are verbalized outside or they're just excuses someone makes to themselves. I want us to address these because if anyone is watching who's struggling with these addictions, I want you to understand why those lies are wrong. And if you're someone who is struggling to see how can we be effective in helping to fight this, I want you to have a good understanding of exactly what is going on in this industry. So the first excuse that we hear is that viewing pornography doesn't hurt anyone. Pornography is an innocent action, one which does not hurt anyone else. Well, pornography is hurtful to a lot of people. Number one, it harms the individual who's viewing it. Pornography, like all sexual sin, is set apart by God as a different type of sin because it is sin against one's own body. That's in 1 Corinthians 6, 17 through 19. It is a corruption in one's mind, leading one to need more perverse material in order to satisfy. 1 Corinthians 6:17-19 says this, "But he who is joined to the Lord is one spirit with him. Flee sexual immorality. Every sin that a man does is outside of the body. But he who commits sexual immorality sins against his own body. Or do you not know your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have from God, and you are not your own?" Scripture goes on to say that you've been bought with a price. Sexual sin is sin against yourself. How? Well, the effects on the brain is one way that this particular sin ends up harming your own body. Let's talk a little bit more about the brain so we can talk about how pornography affects the viewer. Normally, the right side of your brain and the left side, they're communicating constantly, sending messages back and forth, and each side has a dominant role. So the left side, represented here like a computer motherboard, is the logical, rational, mathematical side of your brain. The other side is the side that is in control of things like creativity. And the reason it's the creative side is because it's also the emotional side. It's the one that is responsible for emotional reflexes like lust, fear, and shame. Well, studies have shown that pornography causes that left side, the rational side, to shut down or to nearly shut down. That allows the right brain, the one that is responsible for the emotional reflexes, to override the logical part of your brain, that part that is supposed to be maintaining control, homeostasis in the body. This disrupts the entire process of human cognition and health. Your brain is trying to conserve energy all the time. It's a computer, right? And it's trying to conserve energy. Well, with porn viewership, what's happening is that lust side, that side that's responsible for the emotional reflexes, it is being so overwhelmed and so overloaded that it's having to shut down the other side of the brain, which is the logical side of the brain. And I think that really tracks if you think about it. Think about how many times you've heard a story, for instance, of someone who's had an affair on their spouse, and they really can't explain how it all happened. And listening to the story, you can get so frustrated, like, yes, you know what happened. What do you mean one thing led to another? But in their brain, it's almost like you've blacked out. It's almost like you truly don't know what happened, because once that lust was being fed, the logical side of the brain started to shut down. And so because they had fed that lust and it was waiting outside of that door for them, now it caught them. And maybe they really don't know what happened, because in that moment, rationality went out the window. Suddenly they snapped back and they realized the mistake that they had made and the error they had made. That's the danger of lust. That's why the Lord is so specific to tell us that we cannot play around with sexual immorality and lust. Another way that the viewer of pornography is affected is in physical effects. And there are many of these I could go over. I'm going to be very cautious here because I want my video to be able to stay up. However, the European Association of Urology reported that 45% of young men with a porn addiction also have sexual dysfunction. I can tell you, when I was working in a secular job, the place that I worked had sexual health clinics there in the area where I worked. I worked in imaging for a different modality, a different field, but we were all in the same building together. And so you often heard stories or would have conversations with practitioners who would explain these sort of situations. And what you find is that there are a lot of young Christian couples that they get married and they cannot have a satisfying sex life because one or both parties has been engaging in pornography for so long that they don't know how to be with a person. They don't understand those concepts. They don't know that connection that God designed us to have with one another. They're not going to know that, and they're not going to be stimulated by that and excited by that because they have overwhelmed those circuits for so long. Think about a young person. If they get married, I think it's young because I'm old, but say someone's 22 and they get married. Imagine if they've been viewing pornography for 10 years. By that point, what is considered very normal sexual activity is not going to feel normal anymore. It's not going to feel exciting anymore. And it's a shame to me. It's a sad thing to me because, we raise up young people hoping they will make that decision to save sex for marriage. But if they try to circumvent that by viewing pornography before they're married. I don't think we're doing a good job explaining to them what they're really doing and the harm it's going to cause to their future marriage. It's so sad to me, and I've seen Christian marriages break up over this exact issue. Not because someone was watching pornography, but because that former porn addiction has actually led them to not be able to have this experience that they have spent their whole life waiting for and expecting to be wonderful, and it's not, because their brains are filled with these other images. And that's the other big problem with pornography that's different from a lot of other sins we're talking about. With pornography, you don't have to be looking at it to be looking at it. You don't have to be looking at it to see it. Those images get blazoned on your brain. And even when you are done watching, even if you say, I'm going to put this aside, without the Lord's help, those images are there. And it can be very difficult to have them removed from your mind. This is, again, why I want to have this conversation, why I hope people will have this conversation with young people, with their children. I get it, it's awkward. I understand it could be kind of cringy, but I've just seen too many young people unnecessarily hurt when we should have been talking about this. Lust is in the Bible, so let's talk about it. Pornography is also harmful to the viewer's family. This sin is harmful to the viewer's spouse or future spouse as it sets up unrealistic expectations and diminishes sex to physical acts devoid of emotional attachment God intends for it to bring to a marriage. I'm going to share some more on this in a moment, and I've touched on it in that last section, but I want to put a really clear line here. Imagine if the only person you'd ever seen do computer repair was Bill Gates or Steve Jobs. And then your computer breaks and you take it to the local repair shop and it's somebody's first day repairing a computer. And you expect them to do what Bill Gates is able to do. And let's complicate that further. And let's say that what you saw Bill Gates do, Bill Gates didn't actually do. But in your mind, that like high-level expert is normal. And now you got to go to the guy at the repair shop who does not measure up to that, what we're now saying isn't even realistic, that Gates and Jobs weren't even really doing that work, but you thought they were, and you thought that was the normal level of support that you were going to get. That's what happens when young people are raised watching pornography, thinking this is normal, thinking the things they're watching is normal, and thinking that that's what a regular person is going to do, their regular wife is going to know how to do or be prepared to do. And that's another reason that a lot of Christian marriages can get into trouble, because they're expecting something that is just not realistic. Porn also hurts the models and actors who are producing this material. The subjects of pornography are often trafficking victims, pretending to be willing but being enslaved and forced to perform. Christians who view this material are complicit in their slavery. I will say it from the rooftops and not stop saying it. The porn industry is tied up with exploitation of women, and men too. Please know, I know it happens with men as well, but statistics, overwhelmingly women, overwhelmingly women of color, overwhelmingly young women are being exploited. Women who are in trouble and they need help, they're being taken advantage of. And if you're a Christian and you're participating in the porn industry as a viewer, as a consumer, I want to be plain with you, you're a part of the problem. You are just as guilty as the pimp who went and abducted that child. You're just as guilty as the person who took advantage of a woman who had no family to look out for her. You're just as guilty as the person who got a woman addicted to drugs and then told her she had to do acts to get more drugs. Why am I being so harsh about this? Because we have not been harsh enough about it. We have not been severe enough about this conversation. And that's why I'm being so harsh. Now, you can call me judgmental if you want to. I'm being very honest with you, because somebody's got to start being honest about this. And we just read the majority of pastors are refusing to have this conversation. Recent studies have shown the most popular category of sexual searches was the word youth. It is a huge subset of this industry to look for young women. They will call them barely legal. The thing is, you have no clue if they're legal or they're not. You have no idea what age they actually are. And even if they are an 18 or 19-year-old who just looks younger, the fact that you are being drawn to that is very concerning. It should be concerning for anyone. And I just want to caution at this point and say there's not a substitution in this. That was brought up. Someone, I think they were correct when they brought it up, how sometimes they use the word negotiation, I think, of I can do this instead of this other thing. And I think sometimes people are viewing porn in that way. Well, again, you're feeding a lust that is going to only continue to burn a fire inside of you to the point that you will start doing things in real life you would not have imagined. And by the way, if you are consuming it and you're part of this complex and this industry, then you are already doing something to harm young women. A 2014 article in the Pepperdine Law Review shared this: 1 out of 5 pornographic images is of a child. Over half of all child pornography is produced in the United States. Sales of these illegal images bring in over $3 billion annually in the U.S. alone. This was further proven with a class action lawsuit that was recently brought by the National Coalition on Sexual Exploitation against Pornhub, which is one of the biggest companies in the world, biggest producers and distributors of pornography. And the lawsuit was brought because they were proving that Pornhub knew sexually trafficked children were the subjects of the pornography. They knew it, they didn't stop it. And from what I've last read, I think that is still an ongoing litigation. But I did see where the higher courts had said that there was a substantial reason to pursue and to keep going with the lawsuits, that there was enough proof to go forward with it. I want to also share at this point, as we talk about the harm that's done to the people in these videos and in these images, a trend that we are now at the start of is AI. I like to watch some of the AI videos. They make me nervous. I don't really want to be a part of it, but some of them are just very fascinating. Some of them are great as far as the quality is scary good. There's other AI that I just think, how do people not know this is fake? Like, how are you not catching, you're sharing something that's not real, very clearly not real, not the person you think you're looking at. But some of these are really, really good. Some of these are scary good, how quickly this technology is catching on to where just normal people can use it. Well, one of the concerns is with AI and porn, because now technology has a spot where you could take someone's picture and you can turn it into pornography. It's actually not very difficult to do at all. And so that raises this new concern. That's why there's now new alarm bells being rang about having pictures of our children on the internet, because any weirdo can take their image, put it on an AI body, and now they are presenting as if that child is a part of a sex act. That's terrifying. And again, I say there are so many people that can't catch when this stuff is real and when it's not, and some of it is just so good. Even a discerning eye is not going to know the difference. Some of the I've never watched, just so we're clear, I've never watched an AI pornographic image, but I've watched these other images made out of AI that are so realistic. It's really scary to me. Think about the revenge aspect of that. If you had a problem with, let's say, a leader who's supposed to have a moral high ground, a minister or a politician, how easy it would be to make an image like that could ruin their career. And even if they could disprove it, it would cost them a lot of money and time to be able to disprove it. That is scary, the point that we're at now. And here I just want to make one more comment on the subject of how it hurts people who are in these images. There is, most of us at this point have probably known someone who has faced what's called revenge porn. Usually it's with young people. A teenage boy or girl has been exchanging images with their boyfriend or their girlfriend, which, by the way, means that those minor children have produced and distributed child pornography, and there can be serious legal ramifications for that they may not understand. But There are all these cases where boyfriend and girlfriend share these pictures, and then they get into a fight or they break up, and out of revenge, one of them will share the nude photos of the other. Sometimes they'll post them to these sites. So again, I say that if you're participating in this in any way, you are hurting people. You have no idea if these people are actually willing participants or not, because the actors are pretending. Or maybe it's a situation like revenge porn, where when the person filmed it with a person that they knew and they thought they could trust, I'm not saying they were right to do it, but if a young person has done that because they were not thinking, because again, lust makes you not think clearly, they shared those images thinking no one would ever see them, and now they're out for the wild, wild west of the internet. And you, my friend, if you're viewing that, you are a part of destroying young lives. It's a horrific situation. And I want to toss this in here. Every year I go to this class on trafficking and on sort of the newest internet issues for kids. Great class that's put on by Homeland Security if you're ever able to go to it. But if you're ever in that situation or your child is in that situation, I just want to throw this in here, that there are actually resources where they can help you to try and get some of those images off the internet. But the problem is the internet is written in ink and not pencil. Once it's out there, it is almost impossible to know that you've gotten everything back. However, they can help you in some regards. So if you want that information, reach out to me. I don't have it here offhand, but I do have it saved, and I can share that with you. And another thing, if your children or whomever finds themselves in a spot where they've experienced sexual exploitation, don't erase it all. Take it to the police and let them deal with it there. The next lie that I've heard in regards to pornography is that porn enhances marriages, that it can be a way to explore new ideas for intimacy and marriage. Well, here's the problem. Whether or not one's spouse watches with them, the viewer is still committing adultery in their heart, and worse yet, they have now involved their spouse in that sin as well. Jesus pronounced that lust in the heart is the same as adultery. Viewing porn together is no less sinful than involving a third party into the bedroom. Further, reports have shown that porn consumers are twice as likely to experience divorce or breakup. It's not a good idea. It might seem like a good idea at the moment, but you are inviting jealousy, you are inviting lust, you are inviting comparison. That's going to be very hard to combat. Another argument I've heard, pornography is educational. According to a Barna study, 1 in 5 U.S. adults say pornography has the greatest impact on their current views about sex and sexual behavior. That same study looked at the difference in views of unhealthy sexual relationships between porn viewers and non-viewers. Porn viewers were significantly less likely to have a negative view of prostitution, infidelity, and risky practices than non-viewers. Perhaps they are learning much, but their values are also plummeting. Exposure to increasingly devious acts will most certainly desensitize the viewer until their morals are depleted. So in case that was unclear, what that study was showing is that people who watch pornography are also more likely to give a pass to other sexual immorality. So the more someone watches porn, the less judgmental they're going to be of things like adultery, but also things like incest. You then get into things like bestiality, into things like child abuse. Those are also subsets that you can find in the porn world that are disgusting and horrific, because, again, the brain is saying this is the new normal. You're not getting aroused anymore by that, so you're going to have to take it up a notch until you're into things you just never thought that you would be. One study found that 53% of boys and 39% of girls reported believing that pornography was a realistic depiction of sex. 44% of boys who consumed porn reported that it gave them ideas about the type of sex they wanted to try. Now, that is concerning on its own. It's worrisome on its own. Go back to my Bill Gates analogy. It's worrisome that they think what they're watching a quote-unquote professional do is what is normal and should be the expectation on their future partner. That's concerning. It gets a lot more concerning when you realize what kind of porn these kids are watching. Porn is not only unrealistic, it often promotes toxic tropes, including rape, incest, sexual violence, sexism, and racism. This was from a study in 2016. Even by the lowest estimate, a 2021 study showed that more than 1 in every 3 porn videos depicts sexual violence or aggression. In fact, according to a study that analyzed porn titles alone, 1 out of every 8 titles suggested to first-time users on porn sites described acts of sexual violence. One study found that 95% of the targets of violence or aggression in porn appeared either neutral or appeared to respond with pleasure. This is a category of pornography called abuse porn. Abuse porn could range from calling a woman derogatory words or racial slurs. It could include hitting a woman, choking a woman, slapping her. Again, it happens to men as well. I continue to say women. I don't mean to be exclusionary there. This wickedness knows no bounds. But often it's women in these scenarios. You'll see women being choked, women being thrown up on, spit on, women looking like they're going to die, and then when it's done, they have to look at the camera and say how they loved it, how they enjoyed that, how they wanted more of that. Again, these are usually women who are in vulnerable situations, who are forced to do this because they will die if they don't do what they're told to do. You're essentially watching a hostage be tortured in those type of abuse porn videos. Now, pair that with that 95% statistic, is that when it's done, the woman is forced to look like she either was okay with it or she enjoyed it. Okay, remember that, and then think back that 44% of boys are looking at this and saying, this is what I want to try. They're watching images of women who may even at one point be resisting to add to the excitement, but in the end they liked it. So now you have boys who are being raised to think that women want to be tortured for sexual pleasure. And you know what doesn't help that? What doesn't help that is when a few years ago, all the suburban moms were reading a book called 50 Shades of Grey that just co-opted that idea and said, yes, that's what we want. We like the idea of being bound, physically bound and emotionally bound to a man for him to do whatever he wanted, and that is a sign of love. That is terrifying. That should scare all of us, that these are the thoughts in these young men's minds. Can you see how this is hurting all of us? This is hurting our society. And the last lie that I've heard, pornography is empowering to women. This one is gaining a lot of traction, particularly on podcasts and YouTube videos, where women are being called sex workers instead of pejorative terms they used to be called. They want to be called sex workers because they want to show this is legitimate work that they're doing. They will say that porn is empowering to women as it allows them to be in control of their sexuality and gain financial independence. I have watched interviews with women who are in this industry. Now with the rise of things like OnlyFans, which is where a person is producing this content themselves, they can have subscribers. And so my understanding, I've obviously never been there, but my understanding is that on a lot of these types of websites, you can have subscribers, and then that subscriber, whatever their fantasy is, you can name the price and say, send me what I need for this fantasy, and then this person would do it. So it is now, we're so far beyond the days of just, if you wanted a Playboy, you had to go to some seedy part of town to find a magazine covered in brown paper. Or the story I've heard so many times from women who ended up in porn is that they found those magazines under their dad's bed. That should tell us something too about the effects of porn on the family. But we're past that day, and that day was you just get whatever was produced by the big industries. We're past that. We're so far past that now whatever devious thing the mind can make up, you can find someone who will do it for the right price. And then you hear these young women talk, and they say things like, well, I'm in control, I'm not being exploited. I used to make minimum wage and now I can make 6 figures a month. Yeah, some of them are making that kind of money. Now, most women are out here putting themselves on the internet forever in these vulnerable positions, and they're not going to make money. They're just doing it with the hopes that they will be like these others, and they're not going to be. Again, they're being exploited yet again. But even the ones who are making this crazy money, so many of them have now, OnlyFans is not that old, but many of them are renouncing it now, barely into this trend, because their kids are growing up, their kids are going to school, and they're realizing everybody at school has seen their kid's mom in those situations. If we were to buy the lie that performers are empowered, then my next question would be, if we care about women, now we should care about women enough to say that the fact that they are not understanding that that is not empowerment. If those women want to participate in that, as disgusting as I think the whole scenario is, and I do think they're taken advantage of, but if we're going to just tell those women, okay, you do what you want to do, that's fine. If you want to be that way, be that way. How is it empowering to the women whose marriages are wrecked because of porn? Barna found that out of women whose partner regularly viewed porn, 44% felt their partner was not attracted to them. They were probably right. 38% said it put unrealistic expectations on them. No doubt they were right about that. And 38% also saw a decline in their self-esteem. Not shocking. The last point I want to make about pornography is the one I don't have a statistic for. I gave you a lot of data today, but there's one more that is just my experience. Porn users often become overtly misogynistic because they come to view women as objects. I'm not a person who claims everything is misogynistic. I don't think that every time a person dislikes me, it has to be because they think men are better than women. I'm in a field where my chromosomes, for a lot of people, have disqualified me from the work that I'm doing. Even if I could be the best at it, it wouldn't matter. I'm a girl, so it's not okay. And even the people who feel that way, I don't see all of them as being misogynist. I think there are plenty of people that's truly how they feel when they read the Bible. I believe they're incorrect, and I could have that historical conversation with them and the conversation of looking at the actual original language. I can do all that if we need to, right? I don't think that's just because they're misogynist, but I have been subjected to truly misogynistic behavior. And I will tell you that every time I was subjected to that it was a true thought that women were less than men. Every time that a bishop said to me something like, go make me a sandwich, go back to the kitchen. Every time that a man has said to me that I have no place preaching and I need to go be a mother and stop going and preaching because that made me a bad mom. Something they'd never say to a man, misogynistic. And I will tell you that every single time I faced those kind of attitudes, that man, it was a matter of time before he found out about a porn addiction in his life. I believe the reason for that, and I don't have statistics on this one, it's just life experience. I believe the reason for that is because if you watch material that objectifies women, then women become objects. A woman is then no different than a chair or a stapler, and a man's not going to let a chair or a stapler tell him what to do. In that sense, I believe it's one more way that porn is affecting our society as a whole, because it is affecting the relationship between men and women, not just in a sexual way. It's not just affecting us because it's dismantling marriages, and it's not just affecting us because it's making us have to be nervous about the places our kids go and the things that our kids are doing. All of that is horrible, but it's also affecting us in this way, that it is affecting the way that women are viewed, and women are made in the image of God and deserve honor and respect. I appreciate you sticking with me on this video. I know this was a harder one, that this is a more difficult subject. I understand that not a lot of people want to have this conversation. I don't really want to have it either, but see, I've got 2 boys, and I want my sons to be safe, and I want my sons to make good decisions and Christian decisions and biblical decisions I want their souls to be safe. I want their bodies to be safe. I want their minds to be safe. And I want to know that I've done everything I can so that when my sons are old enough to date and to eventually marry the women that they're going to marry, I want to know that I've done everything so that those women can be safe with my sons too. It's an important conversation. We've got to stop putting our head in the sand and start talking about the stuff the Bible's talking about, and that includes the subject of lust and sex. So I appreciate you sticking with me for this little notes and big questions. Next week, we're going to talk about polyamory and polygamy is my plan. I want to cover that subject before we move on to the next thing because it's a question we get a lot about because obviously there was polygamy in the Bible. And so it becomes really easy for someone to use scripture to try to argue. And that also plays into all the other conversations we've had previously about marriage and about God's plan for man and woman. On the horizon, we have some special request videos coming up. We're about to get out of the moral, ethical stuff, and we're going to head into a couple of different units. One is going to be on the Bible. How did we get the Bible that we had? Why did we exclude some books that some people think should be in it, and why were others chosen? We're going to talk about that. That's a big hot topic issue with the TikTok theologians. And then I think we're going to talk about things like doctrine. I've been asked to do some special videos on that subject, things like salvation, sanctification, talking about different not moral issues, but issues that churches have to face and have an answer to. I'm going to discuss those coming up as well. But I appreciate you joining me, and I appreciate your prayers as we continue to move this series forward. God is opening some really great and exciting doors, and I'm so thankful that you're on this journey with me. So I hope to see you next week. I'm Lindsay Schreiber. Have a great day.